Our X-Files. Welcome to our X-Files Vault. Regular people talking about unexplained phenomena. UFOs. Ghosts. Cryptids. Hidden archaeology. Weird science. Our stories. Our takes. Our X-Files Vault.
Okay, everybody, welcome to our X Vault, and we got another podcast this time with Curtis and Brian. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things we have going on the channel. One is we're into an investigation of an area called Wraith Mountain or Sleepy Valley in Pennsylvania. So if anybody from that area has any particular stories or information about that, in particular some of the weird things that have been going on there, please contact us. We'd like to get you on the show. And then the other thing is we have a new show coming out called The Hollywood X Vault, where our new star interviewer, Elise from Vancouver, will be interviewing particularly people from the entertainment industry, where they get to come on and tell their tales and then pitch their projects. Anybody hearing this who wants to come on and be interviewed by us, whether it's Lise for that show, or if you have a Bigfoot tale or anything else you want to come on, we'll find someone that will do an interview for you. So from that, today's subject is we're going to be talking about UFOs, or more specifically UAPs, as the Navy likes to call them. And the government came out with its report last month on that. Everybody has their own ideas about what these things are or what they're not. And so Brian is from New York City. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me here.
And Curtis is from Boston. These guys will tell you a little bit more about themselves later on. Hey, Curtis.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
So why don't we just start with Brian? I think everybody listening already is familiar with the UAPs and the government report. What do you think it is? What do you think the government is telling the truth? What do you think these things are up there?
I don't know. I think we always have to be wary if when the government is telling us the truth. If I can just come out and sound like a conspiracy theorist right off the bat, I might be paranoid, but it doesn't mean that everyone's not out to get me. So I think they call them, like, what do they call them? The Tic Tac UFOs, because that's what they look like. I think it's odd that, I would love for there to be UFOs, for us to be contacted, but it just seems unusual that they're being so nonchalant about it, that they're just going on joyrides now for anyone to see them, basically. I mean, how many decades have they been supposedly coming down and, stealthily probing us? And that was just to get, some information that way. So, I don't know. I think the government's just they seem like they're just like washing there. They're just like, hey, here's UFOs, deal with it. I don't know, it might be a smokescreen. I don't think they would be so adamantly, honest about it like that. Just putting it out there. So and also, isn't it mostly all the footage is from U.S., right? It's like U.S. Air Force. They're finding the footage. Like I don't know, we've seen anything from other countries, but it seems like the U.S. is mostly the ones putting out these videos. What do you think, Curtis?
Well, you get a lot of Russian videos that have come through, and you get a pretty decent amount of Australian ones that have come out. The bigger, what's the correct kind of wording for this? You get a hodgepodge of these drive-by alien sightings, and they have kind of this overwhelming going to the zoo approach to them, where there's very low interaction with everybody, but they're just hanging out and watching. And if you think about it, it's really possible that these monkeys that shoot nuclear weapons at each other would potentially just be the ultimate target for finger pointing from a superior race of individuals. I mean, I think that makes enough sense. There's enough cases for the justification of it to just be a few individual crazy people that like don't know what they're doing, to be overshadowed by the fact that like it's happening at such an alarming rate that like, you know, maybe the animals in the zoo don't realize that there's people paying tickets to come to the zoo, and like this enclosure is legitimately where I live, and like at some point somebody in the zoo is like, you notice all these humans staring at us, like maybe there's something going on here, like this is legitimately weird, like it's been happening for 20 years. Like it has gotten to the point where the visits at the zoo, that's what I call them, are ramping up, and they seem like they're getting faster and faster. I mean, before there was one sighting that happened in Massachusetts, happened out near Springfield, and it was really well documented because the sighting had taken place at the western part of the state and traveled all the way over. And there's documentation from individual people at each step along the way that the UFO had traveled all the way across the state. And I think that it's gotten to the point to where the realization that these things are there is legitimate. I think that the problem that we have is that because there has been no interaction, or the government hasn't provided us with interaction, that it's left us believing that we're the only thing in the entire universe, which is really sad.
True.
I mean, that Fermi paradox is like the most depressing thing that anybody could ever give you.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess to us, I mean, I guess to the aliens, you know, Earth is the equivalent of like, this is why we can't have nice things in the galaxy.
Yeah, it's the place where you take your kids to teach them why they can't do certain things. This is why you can't do that.
This is why you evolve faster.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the interesting part, and this is where I was doing my research, I know that we had talked about it earlier in the week, is the idea that for some reason the growth rate of the avionics sector and the correlation of what it's slowly turning into and what it's becoming, like if you go from the point where the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk to the point where we're pushing the sound barrier to where we're at now, it is very strange because the trajectory is pretty much in line with the computer. So it's like we get the computer in that same time period, we get avionics kind of in that, like maybe a little bit pre that time period, but in that same sector. I mean, as time is a huge, vast amount of, you know, span, the fact that these things are in so close correlation with each other, and the amount of growth that is doubling over and over and over again was the part that is interesting with this. But the thing that I find really interesting is that if you start looking at today's future aircraft, they're starting to push for the entire fuselage to be part of the wing. Okay. And it's slowly moving from our traditional cylinder with wings into almost a boomerang looking shape. And this has been something that I know that Lockheed and Boeing had been working on for years, because they had originally the idea that if you had folded the wing under and built a cylindrical, like almost a sphere with a hole in it, that the air pattern could travel in such a way that it would always be generating lift, and it would be easier and probably use less fuel to be able to send it long distances. But the newer designs that Boeing's putting out just looks like a giant, almost like a UFO. And that's now. So we've moved from Kitty Hawk to the Mach 1 jet, to the SR-71, to a jet now that they're not even telling us how fast it can fly, but it's slowly moving into a spherical shape. Like,
right.
Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Like, Really? Like, at what point, when you finally start sending up your own UFOs, is there going to be a point where they're like, oh, by the way, yeah, we didn't invent this. This wasn't us.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to do some, research on what new technologies there might be to be able to, make these crafts fly the way they can. I think it's if I'm saying it right, gyroscopic engineering.
Yeah.
It uses a gyroscope and it gets built its own momentum. I was reading it, but I forgot to bring my PhD in physics, so it kind of eluded me a little bit. But I thought that was interesting. I mean, but then I think if they are doing that, experimenting on new types of aircraft, and they're allowing it to be out there, it's either maybe like a scare tactic.
It would be interesting if we didn't think that this was legitimately, like, let's take all the sightings away and just push those into the reality of they are governments testing aircraft, and it has nothing to do with UFOs, and the Fermi paradox is real, which I can guess that there's probably like 50 or 60 listeners that are listening right now screaming at the podcast like, no! Maybe you should
tell people what the Fermi paradox is. Okay, probably most people listening will know, but maybe not.
Yeah. So the idea that we haven't seen anybody in the universe because there isn't anybody in the universe. The idea is that there's levels to civilizations, and you have to pass certain thresholds to be able to make it to the next level of a civilization. We are at a threshold of our civilization that we would have to press through. And if, technically speaking, it's very built in the Fermi.
It's Fermi.
Fermi, yeah. That, we would at some point destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons, or we would starve ourselves out with, global warming. So,
I think the basic paradox is simply, where are they? It's if the universe is teeming with life, and the universe is 14 billion years old, whereas Earth is, I think, 4.5 billion years old, and life has only been, so in theory, the Earth, there's been planets that have been around for a lot longer than before even Earth was formed. So the question is, if the universe is teeming with life, there should be some sign of it somewhere. I think that's the Fermi paradox.
Yeah. No, you're right. So my understanding, and this is what the government tries to give people, and I have a hard time biting down on it. I want to believe in conspiracies. Like, I would love to believe that Kubrick did the space landing. Like, I love conspiracies, but I also am realistic to the fact that, in my life, sometimes the easiest solution is usually the correct one, which is really disappointing. So, if you take a look at this and you say, the alien spacecraft are coming down here and they're watching us like cattle, and then maybe a couple of them got drunk driving problems and crashed, and that's where we got the stuff from, then there's some legitimacy to it. But if the truth of the matter is that we as governments are building things because we know that it's universally feared, no matter what civilization it is. If tomorrow morning we flew a jet that was supersonic and silent and can hover over top of any military power, Russia, we flew it right into Moscow, that they would just give up. They'd lay down arms and be done. You would own everything.
Right. We built a spaceship. What do you got?
Yeah, exactly.
Check.
Well, it's funny, when this first New York Times story first came out a couple of years ago and showed this video, I looked at this and I listened to the story, Commander Fravor telling his story, and my explanation for it, and I gave this to a lot of people, that my own theory for it was, and everybody scoffed and laughed at it, but it was actually recently confirmed by the Wall Street Journal as likely explanation for it. So when I looked at this, I said, all right, this object is moving in a strange kind of way, at speeds that seem impossible, with strange acceleration and deceleration. And I also looked at these things only seem to appear, at least this particular Tic Tac type object, like Brian was saying, where are the Russian videos? Where are civilian videos of these things? So they only seem to appear around naval exercises. Now that's beyond coincidence.
Right.
So when I looked at that, I said it would be extremely useful if the US had a technology that could be used to trick radar and trick pilots. That would be extreme. So what kind of technology could that kind of thing be? And the only thing that something that could move around like that, to me, didn't seem like a craft. It seemed like a hologram. Because if you could create something that felt and seemed solid but was not really there, it's something that's being projected. So it's kind of like if you're shining a spotlight up into the sky at a cloud, just move it a little bit and it's zipping across that cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a simplistic explanation for what a hologram would be, but you're projecting this from a distance. So it's not actually an object moving like that. But I'm not a technology person, so I couldn't imagine how that would be taking place. But it seemed to me that if you had a contractor working with the US and they knew there were exercises going on, they would want to do that on our own forces and see how they react to it. And our own forces would not be told, and they would never be told what it was, because we don't want the secret out. Because the secret, it's not really a weapon; it's just disinformation. And as soon as the other side knows you have it, it's no longer useful, because they know you're tricking them. So there was an article that came out less than, I think, a week ago in the Wall Street Journal that actually, apparently in 2018, the U.S. Navy applied for a weapon that would use lasers to make a plasma hologram. So could a plasma hologram show up on radar? Maybe, So now they took the approach in the Wall Street Journal that this must be one of our adversaries doing this to try to scare the United States. I disagree with that, because to me, it'd be very dangerous for an adversary to get close enough to where we were doing exercises like that to try to create some kind of a hologram like that. So, and also, and for the same reason I just said, they would not want us to learn that they had that kind of a technology, because other than as for deceiving pilots and ships, it's useless. So once we would know that they have that kind of thing, suddenly it's not worth anything. So to me, it's not an adversary that's doing that. It would be our own forces doing it to ourselves. But it's still, that may not be a complete explanation, because it's seen by a lot of pilots. It's registered by a lot of various different types of sensors, and so I don't know. That to me was the most. But go ahead. Yep.
There was a video. I don't know if either of you guys saw it, but it was a military training exercise, and there was a tank, and it was like in the middle of kind of like a war zone, broken up. I don't know where it was at, but it had that definitely in the heat of battle kind of look to it.
Yeah. And
the tank turns the corner, it shimmers, and then it disappears. And I was instantly like, this is Photoshop. This isn't real. And I started rolling through the fake forums, the places where people put up deep fakes and kids do CGI work and stuff like that. And there was a lot of people that were saying that it was legitimate, because you can also see a soldier holding up what almost looks like a riot shield. And what they were saying is the technology was that the entire tank, minus the treads, because the treads were all covered, it was LED covered, and it ran back-facing cameras on it. So anything that was behind it would be projected onto the front of the LED, making it look like it wasn't there. So this is a random video that showed up in war zone territory, and we had military men holding riot shields that made them invisible. You could see the guy pop out as the shield was moving, but if he was planted behind the shield, you would not know he was there. And if that is just slowly leaking out, and the government let that make it out into the ethos, we have no idea how much farther it is. Like
Sure.
the military complex in general is mind-boggling in the sense that, like, if you look at the SR-71 Blackbird, it got decommissioned. In the stuff that thing could do is mind-bending. We're moving into like projects now like Aurora that could, get out of atmosphere, fly to a country in hours instead of, instead of 12 hours, it can get there in 2, and it could be photographing and pop back out of atmosphere. Like, and that's just theoretical. Like, that's the part where we get to this. If the government has been doing this for so long, they're professionals at it at this point. I just don't know why they would do it to their own people. See, that's the part I don't get.
Well, I get it. You're trying to develop a technology that you think that will help your military gain an advantage. But if it's deception technology, you're not using it against your own people. You're just testing it against the military, against your own forces. You're not harming them in any way. But as soon as you let the cat out of the bag, or if the cat somehow gets out of the bag and your adversary finds out that you have this, it suddenly becomes worthless because they know you're playing tricks with it.
So what about the Arizona sightings with the 12 light jump? Do you remember that? Where it had big balls of light sitting over top of Arizona, and they would keep popping up in and out. Like, I mean, that really didn't have anything wartime related, but it scared the shit out of everybody living there. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, those kind of moments, like that one aircraft in I think it was the mid 50s or early 60s that traveled across Massachusetts. Like, why?
We had I had a strange thing happen here about a month ago. I was in the backyard. I was on the back porch talking to somebody related to this project, and all of a sudden, this deafening noise was shaking the house. And we have 2 dogs, and our dogs are not bothered by thunder or firecrackers or anything. This thing was enough that they all of a sudden ran out onto the deck. Like, what is going on? And we have enough trees near us and I'm on the phone, I'm looking around, I couldn't see it. I didn't see it at first. It clearly sounded like some kind of a jet, but it never heard a jet that low before, And then it was gone. Well, 5 minutes later, it came back again. And this time I was able to look out, and what I saw were 4 military jets just happened to be circling right on their turn, was right over our house.
Yeah.
And we never see military. I'm in Andover, Massachusetts. We never see military jets here. Okay. But we're about 20 miles from Boston, and they ended up doing this 4 times. They flew by in perfect. It was beautiful. It was like having an air show right over our house. And they were doing some kind of a shoot in Boston, maybe at Fenway Park, and they were on a flyover pattern over here waiting to do it. But that first time, they definitely flew low enough to shake the house, and I guarantee they did it snickering and knowing that they would, not just our house, but any house along their path. They was sitting there like, let's give everybody a little wake up. They're
Right.
pilots, they're young guys, they're gonna have fun doing stuff like that. So I could see people not being. I could see people in the military not being alarmed about giving people a scare, whether it's with a UFO or whatever, and just kind of geeky laughing it up and saying, "Look at that! They think they saw a UFO." And
Yeah, it wasn't a UFO sighting. I'm in Westchester. I'm in northern Yonkers. I'm right by the Hudson River, and there's always planes, and helicopters going by. But I heard this low rumbling, and it was night, and I went outside. I just couldn't see it. Kept hearing it, and it kept getting closer and closer. And then when they got close enough, they were completely. It was 4 helicopters, like side by side to each other, below the plateau level, which is kind of close to where the water is, which I've never seen any helicopter or anything get that close. And they were all pitch black except their little blinking lights. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Where are they going off to? But I didn't think it was a UFO or anything. But I can see where you're saying that. Who knows? Maybe they were just like, let's try to see how low we can get. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
But if back to the disinformation, I mean, I think that would have a very adverse effect because that's kind of fear mongering. And if you're going to like scare another military country, what kind of response are you expecting to get?
Well, I don't think they were trying to scare. I think the technology is just to, if you're in a dogfight with somebody, say over Taiwan, and suddenly you can make it appear as though you have more planes in the air than you do. It's just, it's just technology, and so they fire weapons at your plane, at false things. They fire it at false targets. It gives your pilots a better chance to survive the encounter. And however people feel about it, we have fought wars, and I'm sure still even fighting in Afghanistan to some degree as we're leaving. And we've fought for a long time there, and in Iraq, who knows when the next one is coming. And so it's valuable if you can make the enemy think that there are targets there that are not.
But if I have a rock and you come with a rock, and the next time we fight, you come with the rock attached to a stick, when you start waving around like this is what I'm going to beat you with, I'm going to go find myself a stick or a bigger stick. If you're going to say, hey, this is what we got, Russia, China, whatever, that's just going to spark and be like, well, I guess we have to build something more terrible too.
Yeah.
Well, but you can look at it this way. We suspended for the 8 years of 2008 to 2016 research on things like hypersonic technology. But the Chinese and the Russians did not. And then suddenly, a couple of years ago, they demonstrated that they have this technology, and they have weapons that give them a significant advantage over us. And now we started racing to get caught up. So just if we stop developing weapons, doesn't mean the other side is going to. They're never going to. That's all. That's just human nature.
Of course. Yeah, I know. So, just no reason to speed up the process. No reason.
Yeah,
don't give them incentive. That's what I'm saying. Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. I just think that the part that we really, this leads into the conspiratorial thought process of this entire talk is that we know where we've come from, and we know how amazing the achievements that we've done with that, and we know that the billionaire class is slowly using their reusable rockets and shooting themselves into space. Slowly doesn't seem like as much of an achievement as it really is, mostly due to the fact that they're billionaires. But the part that I think all of us have a hard time wrapping our head around, and I think it's the issue at hand, is that the Concorde takes off in New York, makes it to London in 4 hours, and it stops getting used. The SR-71 takes off from Kennedy and makes it into deep Russia in, what was it, 5 hours? I think its time it set was 5 hours to make it all the way to Russia. I could be wrong on that. Somebody's gonna pull me apart on the numbers, but I think that was correct. And that's what we know. So it's if we go to the things that we don't know, and we know that all of these companies, you're exactly right. When you show the rock, somebody builds a rock. You can't be behind in rock building, So if that's the case, then all the things that they don't show us are what is frightening. But then we go back to the original question that if we have UFOs showing up the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, where is the usability from a government standpoint to keep freaking out individuals by showing these aircraft off? And I don't physically see there being a benefit. And it, even though they have shown up in other countries, and there's lots of YouTube documentation of that, it's not at the same level that it is here in America. So what do they love American television? Are we monkeys at the zoo, we're their favorites?
Possibly.
It just gets to the point of where it's very hard to buy into the fact that it's just the military, because it doesn't give us enough indication that there's actually anything that they would be doing that would make sense. Why just keep scaring people? Just use the technology. You've had it for X amount of years. use it. Like go do what you got to do. If it is the aliens, then we are the sideshow freaks, and Americans seem to be their favorite pastime.
Well, and there are different theories on what aliens could be if they're visiting here. I mean, we tend to kind of, because of our own experience with technology, particularly over the last, say since World War II, but just in general over the last, couple of centuries, when we think of aliens, we think of nuts and bolts craft. That someone is sitting on that craft and has come to our universe using some kind of faster than light speed travel. And they're sitting there either monitoring us or mining materials or whatever they do. But there could be other explanations, like what if these aren't craft, but something that's organic in nature that is moving, that manages to move, or something that's interdimensional. Or, I mean, I think that there are a lot of strange experiments out there. And I know you guys are very interested in quantum physics, which even to me, once I began, I'm still a skeptical in most things, but I have an open mind because of quantum physics. When I first started reading about that, say 20 years ago, and looking at the double slit experiment and the also called the observer experiment, and the very idea that what we call reality doesn't even really exist unless something observes it. Otherwise, everything just exists in a kind of random quantum state until somebody observes it and then forces the particles within that to become a particle. And so it's just, to me, it's like science makes it possible that the universe is so much weirder than we could ever have expected. And so when you look at that, you say, what is, so for instance, even Carl Jung in the 50s, before he died, he explained flying saucers as being a physical manifestation of the collective unconscious. So you like something that from the collective unconscious becomes real in our reality, even if for a brief time. So there are possible strange explanations for these things that go beyond just technology. I think, I don't know, do you guys entertain any of those ideas? Or
so what you're saying is that if enough people believe it, it becomes real? Is that kind of what you're shooting for?
That's one way of saying it, and I actually have a whole interesting other article that I'm working on that. But but when you're talking about a collective unconscious, it's not exactly people consciously believing in something. If you get into archetypes and things like that are connected beneath the surface.
Seems my only dig on that would be that because it has been prolific in different time periods and documented, like the Yoshiba culture, the one that has the tapestry with the aliens like bringing people up to the spacecraft. I think maybe it's Hindi. I don't remember which one, but there was one culture in there that had the documented tapestries of alien aircraft in it, and like then you don't hear anything about it, and it really kind of like moves out of the culture. I mean, the Celts really didn't have much to do with it. You have the Egyptians building space pyramids, like you have the laser etching in Aztec culture that like they weren't set up for, and they had star maps that were built in. I mean, maybe it could be that it's just always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I could see that.
Brian, what do you think?
I always like to think that to me the universe is just like an organic computer, or possibly an experiment that's being controlled. Because if you take a petri dish, the microorganisms in there, we can't see them, but to them it's a whole universe.
Yeah.
So because I think I read an article somewhere like the universe might be kind of like cubed or something, where it's actually it's a finite thing. So maybe we're inside this giant computer program, because everything is just too symmetric. Everything is based on math. I mean, just you take the distance from the Earth, from the Moon to the Sun, and it's so perfectly set up that the Moon can eclipse the Sun perfectly. I just think that just things like that, just I think are wild. And then I have these other crazy ideas that, Earth is just the perfect place. It's the perfect petri dish.
Yeah.
It's the perfect setting. It has water. They probably grew the dinosaurs. They got bored of that. They got out of control, so they threw an asteroid down with some microbes. They killed them all, and then we went into the primordial soup and came out.
I think one of the things you're talking about is the anthropic principle, right? Where the universe seems to be fine-tuned for matter to exist, strangely fine-tuned for matter to exist the way it does, right down to these values that physicists have calculated that, it's multiple decimal points, that if it's even off by one decimal, it would not look, matter would not be able to cohere. Suns would not be able to form. And then and this can continue right on down to Earth to the exact size and distance of the moon is just perfectly placed to, allow for life to slow down the violence of our atmosphere and to allow life to evolve. And yeah, there's a lot of strange things where it could be a gambler's fallacy where, you hit the lottery and you think it was meant to be, but it's still, physicists have actually, I think their main explanation for this now is that they posit something that they can't find any evidence for, is that we live in a multiverse. And so all the other versions, or most of the other versions of the universe that have attempted to come into its existence have all failed because they weren't able to, I wouldn't say they failed, but they weren't able to achieve. We just happen to live in that Goldilocks one, that one in a billion or
the perfect timeline, as Abed would say.
But so scientists are actually, that's the majority opinion now, but they believe in something that they can't test and cannot show and may never be able to. So that's almost becomes a religious belief in itself, which is no less religious than any other belief,
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, I think that the underlining question of what is the reality of these situations, and I think that it just, because it's unanswerable, because we haven't been given anything to give definitive proof towards it, it leaves speculation in such a wild spectrum. But it's so repetitive that there has to be something tangible to it. I think that it really does start to break down towards, it either is legitimately government influence or it is legitimately real, and we just don't have definitive proof either way. So you can spend all day shooting missiles at both of them. But I think that the bigger picture here, and I think that this was the elephant in the room. I know that Kevin, you're gonna love this, that I'm bringing this up, because I know when we talked about it before. So it doesn't really, we can't have the conversation about future avionics technology without breaking down the Bob Lazar stuff. I know that you really enjoyed that topic, and that's one of your favorites. So I'm interested to hear actually what you have to say about the reasoning why you think that he's out of his mind.
Well, what do you think, Brian? Are you familiar with Bob? What's your opinion of Bob?
Not really. I'm not too familiar, unless I've heard of it and I just don't know his name.
He's the guy that first made Area 51 a thing. Claiming that he claimed that the government plucked him out of, I forget who he worked for, what aerospace company or which one?
It was Jet Propulsions or something in Nevada. Yeah.
Jet Propulsion Labs or something like that. He claims that they've plucked this guy out to come in and work at Area 51 on the UFOs that they have there. And they just kind of brought him in and gave him a tour and said, tell me if I got this wrong, Brian, because Curtis, I haven't listened to him in a while. But they brought him in and brought him on a tour and said, here's our ships, here's what we know about them. Go ahead, kick the tires and see if you can figure out what's going on. And by the way, paying attention to that door over there, that's where we got some aliens behind the window, and you can go and take a peek in them. But no, they're not really there. None of the stories make sense to me. The government is going to just bring this guy in by himself and bring him into the hangar instead of having him as be part of a team that spends weeks preparing for this. they're just going to bring him in with it and say, you know, if you need any tools, let us know. I mean, it's just the whole story seems strange to me.
So the way that I got it when I listened to it, what's that?
Sorry, just a little. So you're saying he was a civilian with an aero, space background that was taken and asked to work on the Area 51?
Yeah.
Or
supposedly an aerospace or a physics background, although there's really almost no documentation of that anywhere, of him attending any schools, getting any degrees. He will claim that the government or whoever has wiped out, evidence of. All we know is that company that he worked for, apparently he did work there, do something, because he can describe the facility and a few people there remember him. But what he did there, whether he was a security guard or something else, I don't know if anybody knows. But Curtis, make this.
yeah. I'll give you the background from as like I remember it. So Bob's working in Nevada for Jet Propulsion's company, and he ends up building a jet-propelled car. Ends up making it on the front page of the news that I think it was Bell Labs. I think that's who it was. It was like Bob Lazar from Bell Labs builds jet propulsion car. Okay. And that's the reason why they can't discredit him working for Bell Labs, because there was documented proof that they couldn't lie. And what ends up happening is that they tap him to come work at Area 51. They bring him in and they start him in. He was a team of 2, and they couldn't work with any other team that was there, but there was other teams there. And the teams were only set to do one specific thing, and the only goal, with no due date, no progress, no hard limits, no you get fired if you don't hit these KPIs. It was basically just deconstructing the technology. And the part that people start to go, yeah, you're making this up, is that all of his attributes and everything he claimed started disappearing. And people would go back and be like, yeah, you never went to college. And then they were like, oh, you never worked for Bell Labs. And he ended up showing the piece of paper as the proof, and he started getting people that were colleagues of him to pipe up and say, yes, I did graduate with Bob Lazar. But the discrediting of his entire life's work plays into the conspiracy theory that if you're a government, you have these secrets. This guy's standing out in a pulpit talking about them. Time to discredit him. Time to make him completely worthless. And this goes back into the whole thing that if these vehicles are real, then propping up Bob to push the scale towards that they're aliens is perfect. And if they are actually aliens, discrediting Bob is perfect, because it makes the whole thing seem illegitimate. You get everything you need in Bob.
Everything you need. One-stop shopping. Conspiracies.
I mean, it's sad because his life's ruined, but
Right.
Have you guys ever seen a UFO yourself, or anything suspicious, or anything you would?
No, I've seen satellites in the sky just going across, which is interesting.
I had a weird incident when I was younger. I was 4 years old, and I'm sleeping in the bedroom, and I look up in the window, and your traditional gray alien face is in the window. And for a long time, it was so terrifying that I never talked about it. And I ended up running into my dad's room, and I was like, oh my God, there's something in the window. And he goes back to the window, and there's nothing there. And he was angry at me for waking him up. And I was frightened and just completely beside myself, because he was like, stop making up stuff. And years and years and years later, I was talking to my sister, and there was a teenage kid and his sister that lived next to us, and he was randomly breaking into houses. And when the cops found him, he was wearing an alien mask breaking into houses. So like, I'm so devastated. I was like, I saw one. It was real. And then like, I randomly come to the conclusion after my sister was like, oh yeah, that kid went to jail. Like, it's like, God damn it.
Curtis is the boy who cried alien.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, they're out there, just teenage kids with acne under gray masks.
Well, that kind of brings me to I wanted to bring up a point, because we're saying that it's either aliens or it's the government. What if it's just a bunch of pranksters? I mean, it could have been, Bigfoot was a guy in a monkey suit or wherever it was.
Shame on you. He's a wonderful man.
Bigfoot's real. The Loch Ness Monsters book was right.
Whoa. That's where I draw the line. Nessie's real. She's a wonderful person.
That could have been a wacky water weasel for all we know. I mean, the crop dust, the crop circles, I think I've seen that it was people with just wooden planks, just pushing them down with rope, holding them down, these intricate lines. So wouldn't maybe, because like civilians have access to so much technology. I mean, It could, I'm exaggerating, but it could have been like a superpowered drone in a garbage can with lights on it.
Here's my issue.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say my issue with that goes back to the Massachusetts sighting, that you didn't have a drone in the 50s. And like, to travel that fast and that far and for that many people to see it, and it was that bright, it's just not possible. Like, it just wasn't possible. If it was a weather balloon, it wouldn't have done that. If it was a Boeing 747, they would have heard it. Like, this was something traveling completely silently that everybody saw.
Is that the one that was discussed on the Netflix episode of that series? I forget the name of the series. It came out just last year, and they went in the interview.
It was the redo of it was that creepy old 80s thing, Unsolved Mysteries. Yes, they did talk about that in there.
Yeah, because they did interview a bunch of the people that were witnesses, and including one who claims to maybe have been abducted, one or two of them. But yeah, there was definitely something that people saw that had a profound impact on their memory. Multiple people that were unconnected, that couldn't have communicated the story to each other, and like Curtis said, over a certain distance too, where.
That's true.
I want to have somebody that I'm trying to get her to come on the show as a guest. Now, I have not seen anything ever myself. And so, as you gather, I'm generally skeptical, but I'm a wanna believer. I'm happy to believe that somebody, I think that the UAPs are probably technology that we're developing, but I don't know that. I'm open to whatever else it could be. And just because that might be technology that we have doesn't mean all sightings don't represent something unusual. But a friend of mine who I do a lot of work with as a writer, she's down in Florida. She's a screenwriter. Her daughter, now she's very smart. My friend is very scientific. She won't even do screenplays to deal with anything that's not real, like in terms of supernatural or magical. She just hates the idea of it. And her whole family is scientific. Her husband's an engineer. Her son works at NASA. Her daughter, I want to get on the show because she was once in the Air Force and at a base where they had video that they showed. I think it was a base where nuclear weapons were stored, and they had video that she said people at the base have commonly been looking at this over the years that shows a UFO kind of coming in and disabling the weapon systems, as you've heard, but in addition, the camera's tracking some kind of creature thing on the ground. So I mean,
really,
these aren't the kind of people. She doesn't want to come on the show because she just doesn't want to talk about it, and apparently nobody that was in the Air Force wants to. But if I could ever get her on the show, she's now, I don't know, maybe she'll do it for her mom because I'm good friends with her mom. But to me, so to me, I'm tantalized by stories like that. But I do kind of have to. I think it changes you once you see something yourself. So, for instance, had Curtis's story, had there not been an explanation, that could change the way you look about a lot of these phenomena. But
Yeah.
until you experience something, it's kind of hard.
He could have been Mulder.
Yeah, exactly.
I could have been doing a lot more than bartending. Damn it. I think that it's one of those hard things. Like, I don't know when we finally tip the scales and we get proof that it's, like Russia fires missiles on us and all of a sudden we park 20 UFOs right in Red Square. Like, if that's the, indication, or if randomly one day they just land in the White House lawn and like, this is what we get, and breaking news hits on every single news program, and they finally for once stop talking about politics. It goes one way or the other, but I just don't know if that happens in our lifetime. I just don't know if it happens in my son's lifetime. I just don't know why it can't happen. Like, if it is a possibility, I think that we're all adult enough that if one way or the other happened, that it wouldn't be the complete end of the world that they think it would be.
I don't know. I kind of disagree on that. I think it would be mass hysteria. Because a lot of people actually have to come to terms, nothing against religious people, but they're told that there's their whole life that there's been this certain way, that there's this god or gods, and then all of a sudden, out of the sky, out of the heavens, comes this creature, and then it's just gonna warp everyone's reality. It's gonna blow.
Yeah, but does that really change religion? Like, is the idea that aliens exist really ruin religion, or just changes the concept that he only built one batch? Like,
Perhaps
no one.
To the fanatics, I'm talking extreme.
Okay.
I mean, there's people like us. I'm sure there's a lot of people like us that would love for that to happen. But then there's also the people that would just probably lose their minds.
I think people's beliefs are very adaptable. I think people's beliefs are very adaptable, because a lot of people, your beliefs are based on something you need to believe in. So as long as that need is still there, your mind will find some way to, okay, well, so if you really believe in Christianity, you'll believe that maybe Jesus visited some other worlds, and
But whatever. Science is adaptable. It has to be. Religion is not adaptable.
I think that
it's a faith. It's a particular faith. You're good, you go to heaven. You're bad, you go to hell.
I think you get some of that. I think the religious people, the fanatics, I think that they're definitely not going to handle it well. I think that there's a large portion of the population that would end up doing like Independence Day and standing on the top of the building with signs.
Sure.
I think that you have a lot of people, especially the preppers, that like go into the bunker and lock down in preparation for, domination. I mean, if you have a being that can travel those distances and they end up finding, our monkeys' selves, and, just the basic idea of resource revolution, resource, there's a terminology for it, where the only way to sustain future growth is by overcoming resources. And the only way to grow resources is to take over places with resources. So like from a country's perspective, like if a country doesn't grow, it doesn't sustain itself. So in the idea of like the Roman and the Greeks and the, I'll just use those two for the example. At the point when they stopped growing, they actually start dying. So like from an alien world conquering domination thing, they would have to keep taking over resources. There was actually a really interesting science fiction book that I finished the series, but it was the Bobaverse, and it was pretty much the same thing. It was him taking over other worlds to keep expanding and growing his universe and protecting the rest of his kind and the human race. It was fantastic read. It's really good if you guys are ever interested in kind of that like cheesy pop science fiction. that's kind of my bread and butter. I'll talk about that as we keep going through this kind of stuff. But the underlining kind of idea of world expansion means that when they do land on the lawn, they probably nuke everybody that comes out the front door.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, if they have the capabilities of getting here, and it is to expand their culture, they're not gonna. I doubt they would share. We're a bunch of shaved apes.
Yeah.
We're to them. I mean, if they can get here, and then also if they're like, what would be the point? Like announcing themselves. What would they get out of it? They're not going to come here to make friends. I mean, they don't. I mean, we're insane to them.
See, we're looking at the idea of sharing from our own perspective, and look at how many times that we've showed up at the beaches of a new world and ruined it for everybody.
Yeah.
But we're also jerks in the grand scheme of our evolution. Like we're supposed to be more adept and more, more kind and gentle and forward thinking and liberal, and we're still on the edge of like civil war with ourselves.
True.
Like maybe it's just us. Maybe other beings could just be nice, and like we can't assume that they could be nice because we can't be nice.
Well, I don't think that would fit what evolution is. I mean, if you believe that evolution is driving the development of life anywhere, evolution has that built into it. That's survival of the fittest aspect, where various types. I mean, that's since life cells first formed on this planet. It's the idea that you're competing. Each cells are competing for resources with other cells, and eventually they come together to form organisms as part of that competition. But that continues at every level of life, all the way on. Now there are different types of ways of competing for resources. The rabbit is out there just trying to breed as fast as it can and eat as much as it can. It's not hunting anything down, but generally think animals that develop intelligence are more likely to be prey, predators. So I think that any alien visiting this planet would understand that too, because they would have come from a similar situation. And hopefully, as they became more civilized as we are now, you start trying to think about not becoming predatory, being able to move past your biology. But I think that they would understand that biology, we all come from that same biological process. And
well, I mean, that goes right back to the original conversation of Fermi paradox and crossing thresholds. I think one of those initial thresholds is the idea of being able to work collectively as one independent mind, so that the idea of having to outdo someone else, like everything is for the collective good, instead of being so individually driven in the sense that how our culture is. So, I mean, that Borg-like mentality could show up and show mercy to a bunch of stupid apes. But
I'm not sure a Borg-like mentality would be capable of mercy, because a Borg mentality would be just want to conquer and everything has to. That mechanism is forcing everything to conform in it, and they're going to just continue throughout the universe trying to make everything conform to it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, like just assimilating us into the collective.
Assimilate or destroy. You have a choice. And that's how it is in communist China. Our strength as a country is that we're built around the idea of individual liberty. So we don't want to have that collective. There are obviously a value to collective goals, but I think there's a danger to the concepts of it. I wouldn't want to live in that kind of society where everybody just automatically moves towards whatever the collective goal is. That's Nazi Germany, I don't know. That's just me. But I want to just interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
I totally forgot that I wanted to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. And I also, in my amateur host form, hopefully somebody somewhere, maybe our moms or something, are still listening to us, or our kids or whatever. If they are, the show with Brian and Curtis is actually going to be called Beyond Reality.
Beyond Reality.
That's our voice actor. Brian and Curtis's focus, in case you haven't can't tell, is on technology and science and the speculative aspects of that, especially in the future, in ways that'll take us beyond the present reality, I guess. So, Curtis, tell us all about yourself. You have a lot of interesting hobbies and professions.
Yeah. So, I am an award-winning mixologist, bartender. I've worked at a lot of high-end places in Boston. I've judged tons of cocktail competitions and done lots of articles for different publications, but that's kind of like day job. And then at night, I turn into DJ. I play on Twitch. So I'm a streaming DJ on Twitch. I play like Friday nights. This Friday, I'm doing a big rave on Twitch. It starts at 6 p.m. Eastern, and I think my set's from 11 to 12. So that's what I'm playing this week. And that's twitch.tv 100 Proof Crew.
Cool.
Okay, great. Brian, what do you got going on?
I like to write. I like to, I'm a world builder, you know what I mean? I like science fiction, and which entails a lot of research, because I like to have it somewhat grounded, because there's a difference between like sci-fi fantasy and like sci-fi fantasy. So I like to have the things that I write, to have some be grounded in some sort of science, whatever it is I'm basing it on. And I try to wrap my head around these things. You go down the rabbit hole, but you only go so far without a PhD. But that's where the fiction comes in. So that makes it more fun. As you said, I started after during the pandemic, when things kind of got wacky. Work was hard to find, so I started a voiceover career. So it's just budding. So that's fun to do. I'm looking to do like animation and whatnot. But my background is I have a bachelor's. It's a BA, but I call it a BS because it didn't really get me anywhere in music industry. So I have a background in being a creative, but I do love science. That's why I like talking to people about it, because you always learn something. And it's always fun to talk about, especially aliens and just predicting what could be and what's out there and what's in it for us, and what's going to happen. And now I'm rambling. That's I like to ramble also.
I do also. It's the rambling.
Yeah. It's like, how do I end this thought?
So if you're actually if you're talking about working with voice for animation, you're talking about voice acting. So are you taking acting lessons or anything like that?
I have, yeah. For the past 4 Thursdays, I took a voice acting class. That was fun. But I want to get more into like just creating voices, because I have a lot in my head that keep me company. I just kind of want to give, give.
Well, that sounds like a show in itself.
Possibly, yeah.
The voices in Brian's head. Let's speculate.
Right.
All right. Well, I actually have a kind of a question that I think maybe is slightly relevant, but a different take from some of the things we've talked about tonight. I did an interview Sunday with Dave White, who's part of the group. Also, we had a guest on, Danielle, who runs a website, Sightings. But Dave is very deep into I think maybe ancient aliens type topics. He doesn't call it that, but the idea that we were influenced by aliens when it came to our early civilization and development of technology. But I asked him about his own personal experiences, if he had any with UFOs, and he has one. And it was witnessed by both him and his family. And the interesting thing about it was he had the belief. I'm not sure if he had it beforehand, if it just came into his head, or if it was something he heard. But when he first saw a UFO, he had an instinct that you can't look away from it. As soon as you do, it'll disappear. So and then later on, he had a similar encounter at his house, and again his family was there, and they spotted something outside the window, and he had his kids in the window, and he said, "Don't take your eyes off it. If you do, it'll go away. Just keep your eye, don't even blink. Keep your eyes on it." And he ran out into the yard I don't know if he had his camera or he was trying to get a better look, but he could still see it. But then as he was going through his yard, in the moment of going by a tree, which caused him to lose sight of it, it disappeared.
Of course.
So it brings up an interesting idea, though. This idea that these things, whether they're craft or some kind of other life form or whatever it is, they want to be seen. And as soon as you kind of lose that mental connection with them, they either make themselves invisible or disappear or slip into another dimension, or I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Is that kind of like, I don't know, Schrodinger's cat? If you're not looking at it, it's not there, or if you are, it's not, or it could be dead or not, you know?
That's such a great analogy. I love that you brought up Schrodinger's cat. I love you more and more every time we have conversations, Brian. It just gets so much better.
We just become best friends.
We're our best friends. So I agree with you. I think that definitely plays into it. I think that I think that you get to this Prometheus level understanding of that, like, when you bring up that topic, this is what I think about. That the idea of harvesting in the same way that, like, we raise cattle, like, if these guys come down, pick off what they need every once in a while, and maybe they genetically can't anymore grow livers or grow hearts or something like that, but when they get them, they get to live, X amount of time, like an extra 50 or 60 years, because our hearts on this world that they've put together, grow perfect hearts for their genetics. Like, we are the perfect genetical byproduct of what it is that they need. The idea that these ships would just pop in and pop out so quickly, maybe it's not sightseeing as much as it's harvesting.
Creepy. No, yeah, you might be right. You might be right. That'd be scary.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be that scary because you don't just torch all the cows.
Right. But then again, what's with all the anal probes? What exactly do they need?
I don't know.
What are they harvesting us for?
Yeah.
The secret is in Uranus.
I like your Schrodinger's UFO. Maybe that should be the name of the podcast. but I do. To me, I always go back to the idea that there's something strange. Like I mentioned before with Jung talking about the manifestation from the collective unconscious, or Schrodinger's cat, the idea of something has to be observed. Is there some connection? Maybe there is when you mentioned a collective between our minds, maybe there is some connection between them. And because when you have a UFO experience that only one person sees, it's easy to say that that's a delusion.
Yeah.
But if it's something that multiple witnesses see, then it becomes harder to explain, but it still might be some kind of a manifestation that's connected to people's minds, which if those minds are somehow connected together.
Well, I mean, based on somebody that's done lots of psychedelics, I think that the idea that subconsciously it's always at the top of it's always just sitting there budding to come out. And it just, for the everyday average person, they don't know that they're sitting on an ocean of wonder and dread. Like, I think that's why if you parked that UFO in the middle of Red Square, no matter if it's Red Square, if it's Tiananmen Square, if it's, Melbourne, Australia, like, it's going to have such a psychological impact on whoever gets parked at, that I think subconsciously, and it could be that this has been going on since the beginning of the time, that we want to know why we're the only ones here, and then, like, what are these things that keep showing up? Why? Like, that's always the question, is like, why?
And Kevin, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
The story, Kevin, you were telling us about your friend and his family about, keep your eye on it. That was that wasn't just the first time. Is that correct?
This was Dave, who's in the group with us on our
Dave.
Vault. Yeah.
Okay.
And he has seen something twice, and both times it had this aspect to it where if you took your eyes off it. So in other words, it wasn't just something he was seeing, but something that knew it was being watched by him. And so it has that aspect of it where is it a mental phenomena? He thinks that I think he thinks it's a craft that is there, that's aware that it's being watched and wants to be watched. And as soon as it's not being watched, it makes itself invisible to us. But to me, I'm not sure if I can buy into that, because why would the fact that he briefly loses connection as he goes by a tree, suddenly the craft no longer wants to be seen anymore? I don't know. But he's a really smart guy, so I'm sure he would have a better explanation for that than what I just gave. So
We'll have maybe a wacky one, but just a sci-fi one. It could be maybe because it seems like people who see these things see them more than once. It's like they're often revisited more than once.
Yeah.
They could be future generations of these people that are coming back, and the only reason that they can see them is that because they are connected.
See, this goes back. I know that we will cover this topic when we decide to touch on time travel, but I think that there's something to be said about the fact of having physics says that having two of the same thing in the same time period is you can't have what it has to do against that whole theory that you can't create or destroy something. So if there is something of the same at the exact same point, that they can't exist, like that, it builds in the paradox of that.
Okay.
I like the idea that the spaceships have been a tourist time capsule to seeing past you. That's a great idea. I just think that, like, if future tour guide time travel people are selling this as a commodity, like, it's such a dick move, like ruining like all of our hopes and dreams and building in this like fear amongst all of us, and it's just like some cheesy futuristic tour guide. Like, that would really bum me out.
I can see that.
It's I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jack Valet. He's the character that, well, they based a character in Close Encounters of the Third Kind on him. He's been on a lot of shows, but he has some interesting. He's got an interesting book out, Passport to something. I can't quite remember the name, but he's looked at the UFO phenomena because he's from France, and he's involved with technology research, but he's investigated these things for decades. And the encounters seemed so strange to him that he started moving away from the idea that these were beings on a craft that came in. It was something more fundamentally different going on. And he's comparing it to experiences that, say, Europeans had with elves and fairies and magical creatures that they encountered. There's something playful involved in it. There's something maybe even sometimes malicious involved in it. But not always hard enough for us to rationalize as astronauts from another world that are visiting us. Something that's always been here with us.
So you're saying if I catch an alien, I can get a...
But that broke up on my end. What was that?
I said, you're saying if I catch an alien, I can get his pot of gold.
Exactly.
Right? All right.
Try to catch one.
Yeah. The opportunity for it to have, that type of symbology would then put it in that we're delusionally buying into this idea. But it's like, if it is the guy in the costume pulling the trick on all of us, climbing in the Nessie costume, I have a really hard time understanding how we've done it for so long and at such a high level. And like, I just always go back to that Massachusetts one, because it's like, you have a time period where the technology is not really that great. I mean, you have like these cars look like they were metal tanks, and the, you know, like they had 6-banger engines that get you up to like 30 miles an hour. And you had planes that were propped planes. There wasn't even jet technology at this point. And it just doesn't, the pieces are just so disjointed with all of these sightings that it just makes it so easy for speculation.
Well, when I say tricking, I don't mean it's humans that are tricking us. I think what Jack Fillet has said is that there is a real phenomena going here, but it's not nuts and bolts aliens. It's something more complicated than that. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's not physical. There is a physical aspect to it. And that doesn't mean that it's humans doing this. It's they are other minds or entities that are involved in this, and they may have a trickster element to them, or some of them may have a malicious element to them, or, you know, kind of the way the Irish had always described the fairies, right? They be friendly and on your side, or if you piss them off, they could be downright malicious. So, you know, it is. I always look to, like, if you guys have dogs, I look at what the dog looks out the window, and they see. Sometimes someone is walking up the sidewalk and they're barking and they seem to recognize it, and other times someone is out there and they don't. And I just their cognition of what they're seeing is almost it's so alien to what we think they're seeing, or to what we see.
Yeah.
You know, and their senses rely on smell and so many other things that we don't. It's just the image that forms of reality in their mind must be alien to what we see, to what we form in our own minds. And so if something else was visiting here, even from here, that's just on a different level of reality, how would our minds process it? How would our minds build that into our image of what it is? It probably would have a very hard time, and it might seem very strange.
Yeah, and they could be vibrating on a different frequency than us, which is why animals who can like sense tremors, vibrations, can probably sense these things.
I mean, they could be fourth dimensional beings that don't understand our 3D cutouts. You know, like, it's just they don't process things in the same way. They're probably quantum powered beings that are, you know, years and years ahead of us in the technology of, you know, quantum thinking and quantum computing. It's very easy to look at the scenario and say, we're the ant, they're the human, try to understand why Steve is going to Starbucks and buying a coffee. Like, I definitely think that's like, we definitely have that disconnect. But I think that the disconnect there has more to do with the fact that we don't have enough answers to be able to really pinpoint what the problem is. We just have nothing but questions.
Do you think there's a way to study it better to try to get some of those answers?
I don't know. I think that I think as a civilization, we spend too much time worrying about the things that don't matter instead of worrying about the things that do matter. And I think that long term, if we shifted our goals towards universally as a group, like if you take a look at like the International Space Station and what we have accomplished by working together, if we could just do that universally, we could potentially start breaking down some of these barriers. I mean, like, first and foremost, why in God's name have we not gotten past cancer? Like, that to me is just universally saddening, that we've been raising money and trying to stop it for so long, and we're only like scratching 50% of it.
I can answer that from a very personal. I actually have stage 4 lung cancer, and so I would have asked the same question that you just did. So, you know, I was diagnosed almost 3 years ago, but since I've researched, obviously I don't have a medical degree, but I study it very closely, everything I can in that time period. And it's an incredibly complicated disease that we've made incredible progress. Like I am on what's called a targeted therapy. And it matches up specifically to this one particular driver that drives my cancer. It's a specific mutation that is on a strand of DNA called exon 19 deletion, whatever the hell that means. And so the medicine that I am on is just a pill that I take once a day. That's it. It has minimal side effects. That's my treatment. It's kept me alive all these years.
God bless.
So does it stay with you?
Does what stay with me? The cancer?
Yeah.
Yes. All the pill does is it stabilizes the cancer. It doesn't. It maybe reduces it on the edges a little bit, but for the most part, the tumors are still there. I have 3 tumors in one lung, and then like 26 bone tumors and 2 brain tumors. But they are and have been stable. I go every 3 months for scans. But the way on eventually the cancer adapts to the medicine, and then it begins to march again, and the medicine becomes useless. That usually happens on the medicine I'm on after 19 months. Right now I'm at the 30-month mark. So for once in my life, I'm above average. But
right on, Kevin. Right on.
It's
right on, man.
But it's amazing what they're able to do with this, because it literally binds with only those cancer cells. It doesn't really bind with your normal cells. So it's designed to bind. It's designed at the molecular level to bind with them. So which is not something that science could have done 10 years ago. In fact, they've been experimenting with this for about 8 or 9 years, and this was approved right before I got the case. This was approved in 2017. So, but it takes many years to get to the. And then what happens is unfortunately, as cancer gets older, it becomes more heterogeneous. It develops more. It acquires more mutations that can drive it. So then you can no longer just stop it with one particular targeted therapy anymore, because it becomes too multiple. So that's where they're at right now, where they'd like to be able to, and there's only certain types of cancer where they have these medicines for. And so, but I think with as AI advances with machine learning, they've had big announcements in the past couple of months about mapping protein shapes. IBM is now, I think it was Google actually developed a program where they can take the genetic sequence of a protein cell and from that calculate what shape it'll be, because the shape is ultra critical to how it will function with other cells. So now that they're able to do that, how many years away, I don't know, but I would say within 10 years, they'll be able to design better targeted therapies that will address most cancers. Whether they're permanent solutions or something that really just knock it way the hell down and buy you a lot more time, I don't know. But it's a very, very complicated disease. And
it's so crazy. It's so crazy that that's the first one that I pulled out of the hat. But, I'm happy that you are where you are. So, but I think that the sentiment still holds that, like, here we are, the 3 guys sitting down having a chat about, our favorite topic. And it's like, that's definitely in the forefront of my mind, that it's like, if we were all working collectively to try to stomp this thing out, and I know there's really good people that are doing it, I think that we would have a lot more movement in the forward direction,
Well, I think the system works actually in some ways better the way it is, because instead of having working like, say, a communist country would, where everything is organized, which tends to be slow and corrupt, just like Bezos is and what's his name, the Tesla guy there. They're better able to develop, Elon Musk. They're able to develop these rockets for a fraction of the cost that NASA does.
I don't think that's
what competition does,
When I'm referring to all of us collectively doing it, I'm not saying that like me working in a laboratory, because I wouldn't know what the hell I was doing. I'm saying that like as a common group working towards specific things. So like cancer's one of them. Like if we were funneling more money from defense, like if we took a quarter of the defense budget and dropped it into cancer research right now, how much faster do you think things would get fixed?
It's hard to say. I mean, hopefully, But I'm grateful for the progress that we have had, and I'm optimistic. As a society seeing. I mean, my grandfather was born in 1906 in Ireland, and you've all heard the stories. Walking barefoot to school. He did.
Yeah.
I've seen where he was born. They use it as a cow shed now, and there were 13 kids in his family.
Wow.
And so to see the progress that we have made in just 2 generations, it's mind-blowing that we're able to not only send a man to the moon, but look down at cancer cells and design medicines at the molecular level. But all that comes from a lot of things working together. Like the only reason they're able to develop that particular medicine is because there's a huge profit in it. Because this research takes millions of dollars, and most of these things never produce a drug that they can use. So you need that. It wouldn't work without having massive pharmaceutical companies that have a profit incentive. They would never be able to have the resources to do it.
I think that we'll probably end up covering this at another point when we get into like CRISPR and that other stuff. But I think that if you look at like Operation Warp Speed and the amount of time that it took for them to drop the vaccine for COVID, that was all hands on deck, 6 months to the people. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
So, so back to the original thought process on like working together as a whole. In that list, defending diseases that could potentially be reduced or mitigated down to not life-threatening, like ALS, things like that. Like that to me just is so huge. The idea that we're still having people that are just healthy one day and gone the next is just aggravating. Yeah. I think that the starvation of anyone and the homelessness problem is out. Like, why can't we deal with that problem in the world that we live in? Like, that to me is just insane. And then you get down to, once you get past that, the what would be like the utopian last straw. I just don't understand this needed idea of conflict between everybody. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but war is profitable. The healthcare system is profitable. Also, if we live like, how many decades ago where people were, you were married by 15 and you had a farm and you were dead by 30. Now people are living past their 90s. And if more people kept living longer and longer, what's going to happen to the resources? We're having problems with it now. We're having problems with global warming. I don't want to sound like what's the word? Culling the herd, trimming the herd, I guess, in a way. But if, the longer we live, we have to sustain these people.
Yeah.
And that, that planet's getting smaller.
I've been reading an interesting book. It's called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind or something like that. I can't call his name, but it's interesting. One of the things that he's talked about. So 70,000 years ago, human beings experienced what scientists call the cognitive revolution. And something changed in the way human beings think, the way they communicate. And the modern the Homo sapien has been around since 300,000 years ago. So for 230,000 years, we basically had no advancement in our tools, our communication. We used them just like Homo erectus used the same tools for 2 million years and never changed what tools they used. Never developed, never advanced anything. And we were kind of along the same path until 70,000 years ago. For some reason, something clicked and we changed. And what he says changed was that we began to be able to envision and communicate fiction. And whether that came about from something that rewiring in our brain, scientists don't know. But the reason they speculate, so for instance, before this time, and Neanderthals could do this. A Neanderthal could communicate to the other Neanderthals, there's a lion down at the river, don't go down there, you're going to get eaten.
Mm-hmm.
But what modern man developed to do, Homo sapiens, was they could say there's a monster down at the river. And that was, and by having these fictions, you began to be able to build larger societies. So by comparison, he said, if you look at chimpanzees now, the largest a chimpanzee pack can get is about 150. And even that's usually large, but sometimes you'll see chimpanzee packs. They're in an area where they have all the resources they need. And there's plenty of resources to support a pack that is even much larger than 150. But once they get to that level, what they do is, because they have a hard time communicating they can't remember who each other are enough, it just gets too big. They break into another, split into two. And then very quickly, those two packs will begin warring with each other, and including genocidal wars. They'll go in and smash each other's young. They were recently a pack, but then it's kind of this, there are natural things built into the program of life that affect us now. And we're trying to, they've still driven our biology and our civilization for all this time, but we're trying to evolve, or at least have our civilizations evolve to a way where we can look past those things. But they are very natural. They're not something that's particular to human, or we're all kind of a result of that biology. But it was
like that built
fictions.
It's like that built-in tribalism.
Yeah, and the idea of fictions is that once you believe in fictions, now you can develop trade. Now you can develop kingdoms and tribes that have chieftains, and you can develop religion. And all those were, so whereas Neanderthal probably were limited to smaller numbers, say, or maybe up to 150 in one of their groups, we could now suddenly invade with hundreds or thousands and expand into areas that they just didn't have the ability to do. Even just the idea of money is a fiction, right? But it enables us to do incredible things.
It's like the invention of lying. You know, how you just said, what if there's a good fishing hole down the way? I'm gonna be like, no, don't go down there. There's a monster, and it will eat you. And now all the fish is mine.
That's right. That's right.
I'm the smartest monkey on the river.
We know how Brian thinks now.
That's right. Stay off my river.
All right, you guys, you want to wrap this up, and then I want to, after I stop recording. Go ahead, Brian.
So I think that we were shooting for the next couple episodes. We're going to go numerically based on the topic. So next one, I think we were shooting for black holes. And then we're doing cryogenics after that.
Oh, I completely misunderstood that alphabetical thing. What Kevin meant was for me to pick the first topic because my letter B comes before C.